All right, welcome to the Be Honest Man podcast, a discussion among men of various perspectives on subjects from the taboo to the typical. And today we are talking about sports. And speaking of sports, football season, preseason has started. Whose teams are playing? And what are you guys thinking about your teams so far this year?
Well,
Well,
the
this is
problem is here, though, all three of us
yeah.
kind of pulling for the same team.
Well, what team is that?
Cowboys. Go Cowboys.
Dallas Cowboys, baby.
How about them Cowboys?
Yikes.
Play
Well,
tomorrow at 9.
All the people who just shut the podcast off.
yeah,
All the
What?
people.
it's only going to get worse when they hear my team. We have the Patriots in the house and the Cowboys, so I'm sure we just lost half of the listeners right off the bat. But
If only we
yeah.
had a Steelers person on here too. We'd just have the full
Oh
like,
God. Yeah,
We-
the most
we
hated
think
teams.
Steelers and the Eagles.
But think of how, we'll leave the Eagles out, but think of how many total, rings there would be if you just put those three teams together.
That's
in the
true.
Same, you know what I mean?
That's true. There'd be a lot of rings that we'd be
There you
supporting
go.
here. We'd be the bandwagon for sure, even though we're not like we've all been longtime fans. But I guess actually the Cowboys kind of got their rings before we were like fans. So
Hey, but you're here in the meantime, right? You're ready for
Yeah.
the next one.
Ready
So we
for the next
supported
one.
We've
them
been here for the
through
disappointment.
all of the terribleness.
that's
Yeah.
true. All of the 2000s, all of them.
Oh yeah. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and jump right in. Who has played sports? Has anybody played any sports here?
Yeah, I've played sports. I did a couple as we were growing up, Sean and I. So I'll kind of be speaking for both of us here a little bit. I
Don't
think
you
we
dare.
kind of tried our hand at. Our mom had us try our hand at our feet at several sports. We did like one little league season of baseball.
Which I did fantastic in.
Sean did well. To be fair, he was playing 2.5 years younger of the age bracket.
No,
but-
I was at the top end of the age bracket. I
There
was
you
like,
go.
I could have played in the next one,
but because we
I
were
wasn't-
brothers, you played
Yeah.
down. And so I'll tell this quick story about us in sports. So if you guys follow like MLB at all or top, baseball, there's somebody named Jake Cave who went to Kickintan High School, ended up getting drafted out of high school to the Yankees, I think it was, but
pretty
like
sure
one
it
of
was the Yankees.
yeah, but one of their like pool teams, right? Not like straight to the MLB, but there's like 7 tiers of baseball or something. So he got pulled up into their system for like $600,000 out of high school. Well, we went against him in our first ever season of baseball. We were the second place team. We were the Phillies. The Orioles were the first place team, and they had Jake Cave. So us, the second best team, went up against them and didn't get a single hit, except for Sean fouling the ball. He's the only
which
person.
doesn't count as a hit.
It
but yeah.
doesn't count, but he was the only person out of all of us, the second best team to even touch the ball that JK was throwing. I cried. I went up and I legitimately cried because all I was thinking was, if he hits me with this ball, I'm gonna die. This is it. This is the end of my existence, because he is pitching so fast for being like a 12-year-old. Like, I can't handle this.
So not only did I foul, but I fouled continuously, and they moved on to the next batter. That works. It's Little League, bro. Everyone has to play.
Sure.
It was a
I was
while.
also, I think, the only kid in that was B League or something like that. Whatever that hit a home run.
Again, Sean was older than everybody else. I don't
Not
care
like
that he's
but
saying
don't make it seem like I was like a high schooler playing with elementary school.
you were
kids.
like
a giant among
14.
men.
You were like 14 playing with like 11 and 12-year-olds. Yes, you were
Believe
like
that.
much larger.
I was not that old.
Sean, you're 2.5 years older than me, and I was like the middle or something for that. Or maybe, no, they played you down because you were my brother. It was your first time ever playing baseball. That is why you were the only one. That's how I always tell the story. Is the only person who could even touch Jake Cave was somebody who was too old to play in the league. Like, that was it. So
Just let it be known that I was a phenom, like a natural talent, and it's a shame I didn't pursue
it
it.
was like a high schooler playing with 10-year-olds. Like, that's
No.
essentially what it was. Moving on. So we did that. We also tried hockey out. I did a couple scrimmages for that. I don't think we ever played an official or anything. They had some weird system at the hockey rink where like you had to be on the team for a long period of time and blah blah blah, or we just sucked and that's what they told us. I don't know, but we were fast. Like, we were definitely
Yeah,
fast.
I was the fastest.
here we go. So,
I was.
he won
Who
a.
was beating me?
He beat. They used to do it at the skating rink. The like races where you just go around the rink, a couple times or whatever. And
Yeah.
Sean won a couple of those, and I was the fastest man alive. Call him the Flash. So we did that. Do we play anything else? I played soccer in high school and up into college, where for Thomas Nelson, which is community college, I played on their like team. Um, but that didn't really. We played in like adult leagues and stuff like rec leagues. We didn't play in like a legit collegiate thing. And then when I went off to Radford, I played intramurals and went out for club. But that's as far as that went. So I think
Hey,
that's
there you
my
go.
sport of it. Oh, we played a lot of football in a parking lot as well.
Oh
That is,
yes. Oh yeah.
Some beach.
yeah, a little bit of beach.
Yeah, I never played any sports like for any real teams.
Because you're not athletic.
No. All right, bud. I used to be, not anymore.
He's just tall.
Terrible. Yeah.
what
and
about,
that's half of being good at football.
What about neighborhood sports? You ever played
Yeah,
neighborhood?
that's what I did. I never
Oh,
played
yeah,
for
we
any
played,
teams, but, like just the kids around the neighborhood played baseball, football, soccer, basketball,
We played a lot of
kickball,
street
wall
hockey.
ball.
Yeah, street hockey. We did a lot of that too.
Yeah. Still
Okay.
Yeah, I
I don't
think
know if paintball
most of
counts
the
as a
sports
sport.
most of the sports we played were in a parking lot
Yeah.
of a comic book shop.
Yep.
Oh,
Bunch of nerds would, compete in a sport called Magic the Gathering. And then we'd go out in the parking
Outside.
lot and play football in a parking lot. So, I mean, if you can imagine just a bunch of nerds trying to play football, yeah, it was a good time.
I'd pay to watch it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we played Magic to strengthen our minds, and we played football to strengthen our bodies.
Total package. Yeah. So I played. Well, my parents were pretty much the same. Or I had to do something every summer. Did play some t-ball back in the day, but it wasn't very interesting. Kids couldn't hit the ball very far if they could hit it at all. So the kids are in the outfield just chewing on their glove the whole time. Parents are like, stand up, here comes the ball. I did play football during my middle school years. That was very, very interesting, to say the least. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Rudy. I have never seen the movie, but that was my nickname for the team.
What position did you play?
Bench.
Okay. Okay.
What position would you have played if you weren't on the bench?
A little bit here. I was a floater. Nothing really.
They couldn't
Particular-
find what you could do. Like,
There you
that's
go.
basically
There
it.
you go.
Like,
It's
it's
like,
right there.
bro, just get in there and do something. Just
Well, the
look like
bad
you're
thing-
doing something.
The bad thing was that I was amazing when we played with our friends in our little cul-de-sac. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm ready for this. I couldn't wait to get my helmet and pads on. I got out there, and maybe this is why I like the Patriots. My coach was terrible. He was a terrible person to be under and play with, and it was very, very bad. So one of the things that I can say, we had a game where the coach did not like what was going on, didn't like the officiating, didn't like the calls that were being made. So he storms out on the field and starts yelling at the refs, and he was cussing the whole nine at a middle school game, and parents are freaking out, and so he gets kicked out. They're like, you can no longer be a coach on this team or in this league. So he comes back in the stands with the hoodie on and a headset, and he's telling the assistant coach, who is now the main coach, how to run the plays. He came to every single game. All the parents knew it on our team, but just kind of let it happen. It was just it was the
He
most
dressed
insane.
like Bill. He cheated like Bill.
Patriots through and through, baby. Yeah, it was terrible.
I feel like that would have been me if I would have played. I don't know. Like I'd like to think that I'm athletic enough that I could have actually played legitimate football, but I could see the whole you were really good in the cul-de-sac. Like I felt like I was really good in the
Oh, yeah.
parking lot, but like
Oh, yeah.
could that have translated if people were bigger and faster and not comic book shop people? Maybe not. Like
And
Well,
we
see, here's
weren't
the thing,
playing
too.
two-hand touch.
yeah.
With
Oh, I hated
the
that.
league that we were playing with, there were some other kids who came from different cities to play into our league. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I was down in Georgia and sports is life down there. But people were dressing or having kids come in and weigh in, and then swapping out for bigger kids when it came time to play. Our quarterback got his collarbone broken when he got clotheslined by this other team. It just came up and just wham! Ambulance had to come out of the field. They carted him away, broke his collarbone in a middle school game. They took it so serious. They cheated to get a win. But of course, my coach was also cheating by sitting in the stands. I couldn't wait for the season to be over, to say the least.
That was
The
did
other-
they at least throw a flag.
The other thing you got to realize, Steven, is that even if you'd got the opportunity to play, you'd been playing with a very high caliber team
Yeah.
in the state. So
Yeah, we went
That
to
would've been
a football school, Phoebus High School in Hampton, Virginia. You know, out of the 4 years I was there, I think state champs 3 times, made it to like the regional finals at least that fourth time. I mean, just absolutely dominant. Uh, 21 kids from my graduating class went to college for football. I think 7 were D1. So it was pretty ridiculous in
Yeah.
terms of the level. But I mean, they tried to recruit me, dude, you know, so
I was
I
gonna
went.
say, like, I wish that I would have had some discipline to at least try for that. I mean,
So I played
they're
soccer for the
stocky
high
and
school.
quick.
Exactly. So I played soccer for the team and I was very aggressive. I had never played soccer until high school, so I didn't have all of the talent the first 2 years or so. Not that I had a bunch after, but the first 2 years especially, I just kind of was like bigger than a lot of the other kids in soccer. You know, they're typically, you know, thin, fast, you know, lanky, can run back and forth a lot. And so I would body them a lot. And I remember being at a game and one of the stepsons of one of the special teams coaches played soccer. And so he was at the games and people would be asking him, he would tell me, people would be like, oh, was he one of your guys? Like, does he play football? Like, is that because I was trucking kids in soccer, just going. They're like, all right, he's short, stocky, but you know, got some size to him, but he's quick. And so they tried to get me. And senior year, I went out to one practice, and I was like, this is way too serious for me. The discipline for our sucky soccer team was nothing. We'd be running around the field mid-game, tapping each other in the nuts, just literally, just like sack tapping each other. Like we were awful. We'd win like 1 or 2 games, including preseason, including everything, scrimmages, the whole year. And then I go and like show up for a practice for a team that wins states. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, y'all don't mess around in here. Like, if the coach is talking, you're not looking at him, you're in trouble. Like, legitimately. Like, you have to drop to a knee, stare at your coach, like, all attention. And if you glance away, you're getting called out. It's that discipline. But it was working, so I can't knock it. Like, they were winning. But I was like, no, I'm not cut out for that level. I can't
we're
go
not at
from,
that point.
can't
Yeah,
cut
I
out from
definitely
doing
wasn't
that.
there either. I can tell you that. I did many a laps during practice. All right. So, do you guys think young men need to play sports?
I don't think need. I think it is beneficial. I think having something that they can be a part of a group or a team, whether that's something like sports or even like Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, something like that, where there's socialization, team building, discipline, and just stuff like that. I think that's important, but I don't think it necessarily has to be sports. I just think sports is one of the easiest things to kind of relate to and that kids would be interested in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I'd say the same thing. Required, no. Like, do they need to? No. I think it's a good way to learn a lot of skills. I wish I would have played some sports earlier or more consistently earlier. I think it's a
Yeah.
good way to learn discipline, to learn how to work with a team and a system, to both gain an ego, but also have that ego checked repeatedly. Like, I think there's a lot of to learn to win, to learn to lose, the ups and downs. I think there's a lot to learn through sports that can give you lessons for life, for
Yeah,
you know, the workforce and stuff.
Yeah, I feel like it's something that I definitely would have liked to have participated in for all of the reasons we've listed. But I think another thing that could be beneficial to a lot of young boys, especially boys that don't really have a positive male role model in their life, you know, whether it be father, you know, some other figure. A lot of times sports can provide that, or any of these activities. I'm not necessarily saying like, oh, you're my coach, so you're my stepdad now, but like it is someone you can look up to, that you can learn from, that you can emulate, that just a lot of kids, you know, myself, I feel like I didn't have that. And not only with all the discipline and the things that come along with it and the activity and skills that I would have benefited from, but I think that would have been beneficial as well.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I think is overlooked. Having that positive role model in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good, a lot of bad. I wish that my parents would have pushed me a little bit more to play sports when I was younger. But at the same time, I think about it, and I know the way that my mom is. She's one of those. My baby can do no wrong. He's perfect, and I love him. He is the light of my life. I feel like
Here's
that would
mine.
have really messed me up.
Our mom wouldn't. She wanted us to do a bunch of sports, but never football. That was actually one that she was like, no, like you're
She
gonna
didn't
get
want
hurt. I'm not. No, like not doing
she didn't
that
want the
one.
contact.
To
Yeah,
be
she did.
fair, that's a great idea. It's not good for kids' brains. It's
Yeah.
just not. There's no
Yeah.
one can argue any differently.
Well, I'd
Just
never
not.
get hit, so I'm too
All
quick.
right, bud.
Too quick.
At Phoebus,
No, I
you'd be getting hit more in practice than you would in real games.
It's true. I had to be
You'd be
kidding.
on the bench.
Nah, dude.
Who was that? What was his name? John Tell Evans?
No, the one that would have been like running back or something, right? Assuming that's the
Yeah.
position, would have been Sean Austin. He went off to
Oh.
West Virginia University.
It's crazy to still remember all the names and remember all this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of
We,
anybody.
we
in
were
high
a
school.
we were a football school, and I
Yeah.
actually knew some of the guys, right? Like Taj Boyd he's a legit friend of mine, and he went off to play for Clemson, broke a bunch of records, made it to NFL, but not like quite. Like I think he got drafted to the Jets, and then went to the Steelers or vice versa, but
He played
never
at
made
Buffalo,
it
didn't he?
past.
I think he played for the Ravens at some point.
Never made it past like the training camp stages, though. I don't think. And then he went and did the Canadian Football League, I think, for a season, and then stopped. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You can be great in high school, great in college, but it just doesn't work out once you get to the pro level.
Yeah, well, I think
Well,
part of
it's
it was
just
also his
distilling that
height.
talent.
I think it was only 6 foot or 6'1". It's hard to be an NFL quarterback when you're only 6 foot or 6'1".
Oh yeah. Yeah, you need the height to see over the
So,
line.
Like he wasn't exceptionally tall, so I think that probably came into play with it at least somewhat. Plus, he was a mobile quarterback, and
Yeah.
I feel like when he was trying to get in, there weren't. Now there seems like there's a lot, but I feel
that's
like
kind of
maybe
that's kind of the move now.
yeah, but I feel like at the time he was really trying to. Like it wasn't as I don't know. Either way, yeah, it would.
We're getting off topic.
Yeah, it would have been. I do think it's good, and I wish I would have done a little bit more. I wonder how I would have matured or aged in that like way had I done a lot of team based sports growing up versus like I did like competitions and video games.
Yeah,
Hey.
probably wouldn't have been so depressed all the time.
Give you an
So I
outlet.
know we kind of spoke a little bit. So what are the good things that a guy can learn, a young man can learn from sports? I know we said discipline. What were some of the other things?
Teamwork, like working within a team, working within a system,
Oh yeah.
the ego checks. Again, being able to build up and be like, oh, I am good at this, or I'm not going to be good at everything. Working hard and getting results for it.
The discipline of work, putting in the work, not getting used to putting in the work without expecting instant results. That's something that I know for sure I could have used.
Yeah. That's very key. And I think one of the biggest things, like you said, is humility, learning to lose gracefully or take that loss, because you're going to have your wins, you're going to have your losses, and being able to take it, process it, and then figure out your next move
Mm-hmm.
and not dwell on it or let it beat you down or
Yeah, I
rage
lose.
about it.
I lose exceptionally gracefully.
Hey, bud.
Man,
Be honest, man.
we're gonna need a lie check on this. We're just gonna put a little tick marks on
So
each one.
I'm gonna give you one example that was very recent. We're playing board games Saturday night. This
was
past
hoping for this.
Saturday night.
I was hoping for
and
this.
we're playing this game. What is it called? Code Names.
Mm-hmm.
And Steven is on one team, and I'm on the other. And who else is we had? You don't know the rest of our friends, but either ways, it was two teams. And,
I was on Steven's team.
yeah. So the
And
team I'm on,
His wife
I'm not
cheated.
saying is wiping the floor with them, but it's whatever is the nice way of saying
we
that, right?
lost 4 games. Yes, 4 games in a row we lost.
At
I
some
think probably
point,
one card in like every one of them.
Yes.
Steven is just getting more. You can see it visually. He's becoming more and more disgruntled with the scenario. And at some point, I think during the last game, he says, "If they're giving the wrong answer, or picking the wrong answer, just laugh," or something like that, trying to insinuate that my wife was cheating.
Because
And,
she was.
She wasn't.
you guys were about to
Yes.
do something. Hold on. Let me, because this is what I wanted. Look, you guys you were about to pick and you were kind of set. And then you said, well, it could be something. And she went hands in the air, just laughter because she was like, oh my God, I can't believe you're changing it now.
Yeah,
And
but no
I
one
was like,
noticed that.
the point is you can't do that. Like the whole point is you can't, as the code person, give any reaction to it. And she was a very emotive when you guys were deciding things, doing things, whatever. And so I pointed it out. That's all. I pointed out. I think we lose either way.
Pointed it out.
I still think we
I
lose
wish
that
I
game.
could somehow convey the level of discontent that was brewing on this man's face. The man who just said, "Oh, I lose very gracefully," obviously in a sarcastic way.
Yeah, it was
but
sarcastic.
I cannot in any way depict it.
My man got shut down in Werewolf so hard, he said, let's play something else. Like, don't even come at me.
That's
right
true.
now.
No, I hate that game. I'm terrible at it. I cannot lie. Worth a damn.
I looked over, saw just a look on his face, and said a shot, and it was a wrap. Like,
Twice in a row.
twice in a row.
All right, back on topic. Steven
Well, that
Wyatt,
was on
he's-
topic, but yes, no, I do sometimes have a little bit of a problem with losing, especially if I feel wronged. And I still think, I want to make it clear, I still think we lose that game. But it was like, when she did that, I was like, hold on, you can't do that. And so I
didn't
needed
say
to point
that
it
way.
out.
That's fine.
No, I told my teammate to cheat too.
Ignore the fact that they cheated earlier in the game. But he also has a vendetta against my wife when it comes to anything like this because she's very good at like puzzle games or trivia, any type of thing.
I beat her the last 2 times. I'm not even worried about it.
That's 2 times of what?
And we play code names.
Oh no, I'm not worried about. But you know, we go. There's a restaurant called Food for Thought, and they have these little quiz things on the table. That Steven declared that my wife must have looked at every single one of them because she was figuring them out too easily. She must have memorized every table's cards in that restaurant.
Which is weird, but if you're dedicated, I mean, if she wanted to put in that time, but when I just be pulling stuff out of the hat, just, how about this super crazy equation? She's like, 2, and it's 2. Like, it can't be 2. So, yeah, I mean, that's it.
why she, makes the big bucks.
Yeah. I do not lose gracefully.
Hey, that's what
Most of the time.
I don't feel like I do either.
No, you don't.
So I'm not
Neither
the
of you
one
do.
to be talking.
Well, because
not
I'm
to be the one
verbal.
talking crap, but
I tend to be more verbal about it, and I show it like expression wise, whereas you just mope.
oh yeah, I mope hard.
break
yeah.
You mope or break something. Yeah.
So it's either severe depression or severe anger.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say, this is something I've gotten better about by just not participating in anything. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's
I
something
still
that took
do anything that I could lose at.
No, I've definitely had to work on that, and it would have been nice to have gotten that out earlier in life and gotten someone to coach me on the discipline of those things.
Yeah, I think
For
it would
sure,
have
I think
been
it's beneficial.
having, like, if we would have done sports at a young age and got that built in of us being checked. Because even if we had that little bit of, oh, I hate losing or I don't lose well early, that stuff would have gotten checked in by our coaches, by teammates, by parents, by somebody at some point would have been like, hey, like get it together. Like you lost.
You know what you would have learned? You would have learned to take your anger out through exercise because you would have been doing laps.
Mhm.
You're angry? Go run about it. Come back when you cool down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think team building and that is very key. I know in my line of work, you have to collaborate and come up with things, and group problem solving. It could be an issue. It could be an
Yeah.
issue for a lot of folks. So having to do that as a team and actually rely on other people, and that's another thing too. People don't like to. I want to do it all. I'm gonna do it myself. I don't think you can do it. I'm gonna do it. And
Lack of
having that,
trust.
yeah, lack of trust. So having a teammate or knowing that you can trust other people, you don't have to do it all yourself. That is a very key thing you can learn.
I think one thing, for instance, Chris, like if you would have played sports growing up, I feel like your loot hogging in video games might be like a little bit better. You would realize that the gold and the items go to the team and not just you. But because you played alone, you take all of the loot.
Every man for himself.
I don't think so. I mean, everyone wants to be the star on the team, you know.
Okay.
I mean, just
Oh
for
my
example,
God.
just look at football, right? Teams like the Packers, they signed Aaron Rodgers to a gigantic contract, and now they can't sign anyone else. But it doesn't matter because he's gonna win the games for them. So, as long as I played sports and I was a superstar, I'd be right where I am now.
Yeah.
Just getting all the loot.
Just
Yeah.
getting all
You
the
just
loot.
remember that.
I w't.
Because I could have been a star.
In fact, it might be worse. You know, I'm just saying. But yeah, I think everything that everyone has talked about. Plus, I think a little competition is healthy,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
just for people. It's good to have something to put yourself up against. Plus, when you win, feels a lot better.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. I love winning.
Oh yeah, we know.
Competition is fantastic.
So on the flip side, there's some bad things you can pick up.
I feel like that would be like overly competitive, like everything is a competition, but at the same time, I don't know if that it comes because we didn't do that many sports and we're both competitive.
So I think it's to me it's just habits that you could pick up from teammates and coaches or staff that are detrimental to you and your goals. So it's just like we talked about the positive influence that that can have. Just like everything else, it can have a negative influence, and just like everything, like you said, that over competitiveness and stuff like that. Like you take anything too far, it can be detrimental. But I mean, that's all that comes to mind for me is just kind of the flip side of everything, just that negative influence of being around people who may not, have your
So
best interest in mind.
I have a couple, but they're like super generic, not related to like you as a human being. They can be expensive, right? Sports can be expensive. Getting into leagues can
Yeah.
be pricey. The gear can be pricey. The time commitment. Like if you get too heavy into sports, you maybe miss out on other things in life. You have a tournament coming, you have to eat a certain way, you have to, spend enough time practicing. It can really steal the limelight. And I guess that goes into moderation, being able to enjoy your life, not overdoing it when it comes to that. Those are things that I would say are negative, but I think it is mostly positive.
Well, you like what you talk about there is another aspect of that is when you have a parent who's trying to live through their kid
Hmm.
and using them essentially as the tool for success and something that either they never participated in or didn't do well at or are just obsessed with. There's definitely, I'm sure we all knew someone, in high school or have met someone in life whose parents are just taking it too far. Like, it may not even be the thing that the kid wants to do anymore, but like, they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's that can, obviously, it's a very personal, person to person issue, but could be a big issue as well.
Yeah, I would say over competitiveness, that not being able to lose type of situation where they go above and beyond to win. Like my coach just could not accept that my team was going to lose. So everybody was always doing something else. It was never us. It was everybody else who was the problem. And that I mean he cheated to try to win. He literally was like, "Hey, I got kicked out, but I'm going to sit here. I'm still going to do what I got to do to win because it's that's the only thing that matters to me is winning." And that can be a real it can really
I,
drag down that sport.
Yeah, I think
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of the bad for sports is more so a product of the environment that you're in. You know, if you're playing under a bad coach who's just not just a bad coach, he's just like a bad person, yeah, it's not going to be great for you. Or
Oh
the
yeah.
kids you're playing with, maybe they don't like you on the team. You know, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think a lot of the bad stuff is more so what's around you than the sport, than actually playing the sport itself. Besides, like, I mean, you're going to get hurt, but that comes with the territory.
I think bullying also can happen in sports. If you're the kid that is always messing up, or you're the slowest kid, or whatever the case may be, you're you get in the locker room, they're like, "Oh, you did it again, man! You suck! You're always doing this to us. That's why we can't win. You're lucky your dad's a coach, or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be," and that can have negative effects on somebody. Or if you're not feeling good enough because you're not the star of the team, or everybody's praising somebody else and you're never getting the praise that you're looking for, even though you're trying your best and maybe you feel like you're not worthy. So you may have a self-esteem issue. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, all of those are valid. 100%. Those are some negatives. I still think when I think about it, look at it, whatever, it's there's a lot of good that comes out of it versus the bad. I mean, even just exercise, just the amount of
Yeah.
exercise you get by playing sports versus not, the activity level, is going to be raised, going to feel
And a
more
lot,
productive.
yeah, a lot of pretty much, I would say almost all of the negatives that we discussed are something that, as long as you have an engaged parent, as long as the parent isn't the source of the issue, the bad influence, they can nip that in the bud. They can
Yeah.
take them out of that. They can put them in another school. They can put them in another sport. They can, write to the school and say how the program, how the, what the how hostile the environment may be and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily like, oh, the kid had a bad, bad run in this sport, he can't play anymore. It's like, no, we just, the parent needs to kind of step in and help them adjust and figure out, how to better mitigate that. So
I agree. So, are sports a big influential source of manhood and masculinity, do you think?
I think it has been at least tied in. And I think depending on where you're at, like rural areas or just areas that are heavy into sports, I feel like it's a big tie-in. Like the big bad guys, the tough guys, the masculine guys in high school play sports, and then anybody else is a nerd or whatever it is. And so I do think that it has been. It's definitely in like films, right? Like if you're watching a movie, if you're watching TV, it's always the toughest, most attractive men at the school play football, right? Like
mhm.
it's just always like that. It's like tied into it. Is that if you play sports, you're stronger, faster, more attractive than anything else. So I think it's messaged that way for sure.
I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is the type of sport, right? Obviously, we talk about young men, we talk about football and stuff like that. But when you look at sports like boxing, or martial arts and things like that, where like it's about the individual. Obviously, you have a team behind you to help you train and stuff, but like when you're performing, it's the individual. And masculinity, manhood, all that stuff are kind of at the forefront. You know what I mean? Like, so I think in obviously in most sports, there's going to kind of be that, like Steven was talking about, that kind of stereotype, but also a message that kind of comes along with that. But in certain sports, I think that it definitely plays a much stronger role.
Yeah, I know that when I can't speak for everybody here, but growing up, seeing those sports figures, they were definitely something a lot of guys looked up to. We had Bo Jackson, you had Michael Jordan, all these guys. They were a big source of masculinity and manhood, and what every boy wanted to be. Wayne Gretzky. These guys all had cartoons growing up in the '90s because they were so influential for young boys. And
Yeah.
toys started coming out, and all the cards and stuff. They were I think, very influential for a lot of the kids growing up. Probably still are today.
Well, I
So
think that's part of the where and obviously there was generations before us that kind of did the same thing, but I think it really took off with kids going from, oh, I want to be an astronaut, to like, oh no, I want to play baseball, or I want to play basketball, I want to be the next Michael Jordan, or things like that. So I think it definitely had a big influence on a lot of kids growing up. Now, whether that was like a directly like kind of masculinity manhood type influence, or if it was more of just like, I want that sort of success, I don't know. I think it depends on the kid. It depends on the messages they receive from that, and a lot of that is how their parents interpreted it to them. A lot of times, like whether they use them as example to teach certain lessons, or if they were just like, okay, whatever you saw on TV is, whatever you saw, and that's
yeah.
what you learned.
Well, I think that also can go for I don't know if you consider wrestling a sport. Not like, I'm talking about WWE, not like actual wrestling, but even like martial arts or boxing. Mike Tyson, those types of things. Just that muscle bound dude who can walk around and beat everybody up and do whatever he wants to do, and nobody can say anything to him. Uh, Nobody ever make fun of him to his face. I can tell you that. So those types of things, I think, were a big influence for a lot of kids growing up.
I do
That's still an
think
influence for me.
we are leaning more towards some of these where it is the biggest, the baddest. But you have things like tennis, soccer,
It's true.
baseball, maybe, where it's not these massive human beings. You don't have to be jacked. Like you don't have to be as fast, that sort of thing. When it comes to sports, and you get a lot of the same benefits, but maybe it's not pushed on you as hard. Although I think each one can have some sort of a negative culture as well. There are definitely some. I think baseball has had some rough things. That what is it like? Everybody in baseball, for some reason, it's like chewing tobacco is just like a baseball thing. Like if you want to play baseball, you got to have some dip
Yeah.
in your lip and go out there. And again, that's not everybody, but it's trends that I've seen in my own personal
Yeah,
experiences
you don't
and
really
stuff
see
like
that
that.
in other sports.
Yeah. So just interesting little cultural things that go along with sports. Maybe one time it was just some big player was all about dip, and then somebody else started doing it. It picked up and it starts these trends and stuff like that. So I think like sports actually are like this part of our culture that can change the way that people go about living their own lives and the way that they pursue things. There's a lot of influence that comes in, even outside of what we've talked about.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I mean, just looking at the sports, right? So like soccer and tennis aren't as big and as popular.
Well, in the
So you're
In
U.S.
the
not
In the
States.
U.S.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying in the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
So you're not seeing these smaller, not so muscly guys as much as you are seeing these 7 foot tall monsters in the NBA or these 300-pound monsters in the NFL. So these are the guys you're seeing more of.
True.
Very true. So, what do you guys think men are drawn to organized sports?
I think one, it's like essentially playing a game with your friends is one of the things, right? Like it's competition, it's fun. I think the other part of it is that we're kind of told that we're supposed to, you know, as we're growing up, play a sport. What do you play? That sort of thing. I know I've been asked many times, did I play sports? What sports did I play? Stuff like that. I think a lot of people get asked that. And when you're growing up, like it's something that most people expect that their parents put them through at some point, or other people expect that your parents at some point got you to do sports and stuff like that, which most of us have. So
Yeah,
You're
I
kind of
actually.
taught when you're younger that, if you play sports, you're going to be one of the popular kids.
yeah,
Yeah,
connected to
I
that like status. It's connected to status in a way.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, very
had
true.
my physical the other day for work, and one of the sections is kind of a physical uh, part of the physical, I guess you could say, like your physical health, your exercise, that kind of stuff.
Found out you're still not
And
athletic, huh?
no, they I did better than I did last year actually. Which last year I did good, but like it's just improved, which I wasn't expecting, but hard work pays off, I guess. But I was the guy there. He had asked me if I'm running on the treadmill. He's trying to get my heart rate up so I can run a stress test and all that stuff. And he asked me if I played sports in high school, and I was like, no. I had a full time girlfriend that I skipped more school than I attended, so like didn't really have the discipline. He was like, yeah, you just look like you played football. I could have done running back or something. And I was like, yeah, I wish I had. So like, I mean, this goes to what you're saying. Like people will assume that everyone has played sports at some point,
Yeah.
especially
But
if you're
if you're built like us.
So, are we like? Do you think men are naturally competitive? Like, why do?
Yeah.
I think that's
I think
fair to
people are
say.
naturally competitive.
Yeah,
True.
I
I
do
think that
think certain
science
things. Yeah,
says
like
that higher testosterone and all
exactly
that.
biology, like this testosterone levels and things like that can impact like that drive to go compete, to
Dominate.
win, to yeah, that sort of thing. So
What about like
Now,
these physical sports, like boxing and things like that? Like, there are some sports like soccer and tennis that both, men and women are both interested in. The mixed like martial arts and things like that. They have a women following and are kind of, I don't know. They just haven't taken off as much as men when it comes to wanting to get into physical things, I guess.
yeah, I mean, I think boxing and mixed martial arts stuff like that are unique because of the violence that is inherent in it. That even to like competitive women, that can kind of be something that they're not really into. Um, but I think when it comes to other sports, I mean, you've the number of women that like watch and follow like strongly like sports like football or baseball or things like that is just at least noticeably higher than I remember, growing up.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think that there's definitely, I mean, a lot of people into it. Now, playing it obviously they don't have the same opportunities. So it's you can't really kind of speculate on, as far as playing it like typically if there's any sort of higher end or really any sport, like they have their own league at pretty much every level or their own version of said sport, whether it be softball versus baseball, whatever.
Yeah.
And even when they are playing the same sport and potentially at a higher level, it's less popular. Look at US, national soccer. So it's kind of one of those things where I think that it's there's definitely the interest there, but I think that especially when you mention, boxing, combat sports, like that's there's women that participate, but it's definitely going to be a more male centric sport.
Well, I
Yeah.
think part of that is as it's become more socially acceptable. I mean, you have to think it's probably a pretty brief period of time where it was like, oh yeah, women go in there and punch each other in the face and try to like
Oh yeah,
choke each
that's
other out, right? Like, I mean, this is, and so like with anything, I'll compare it to esports, electronic sports, competitive gaming. People are always like, oh, how come women aren't competing at the same level as men, even though it's not like biological, right? It's not who's bigger and stronger and whatever. It's video games. And I think it kind of goes to the same thing where it's still a small amount compared to. So if you take a million men and you pick the absolute best, just pure statistically, it's going to be probably a little bit higher if they're versus like 2,000 women, right? Because you're not getting the same level of the number of people, and therefore you're not getting the absolute best there are in the world because those people are choosing to not pursue that. Am I explaining that in a way that kind of makes sense?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
I see
there's a
what you're
much
saying.
smaller pool of women who are now open to doing combat sports or who are open to doing whatever, and therefore you're not seeing as much of it. But it's becoming more socially acceptable. More, for instance, more women are now playing video games and playing competitive video games than ever
Yeah.
before, and therefore you're going to start seeing those stars start to show up who might have never played before in the
I mean,
last
we got
generation.
the Ronda Rouseys, we got the Nunez out there,
Hmm.
kicking butt. So
Well, it's kind of one of those things to piggyback off Steven's point is that you you don't have as much influence on girls to participate in a lot of the same activities that boys are kind of pushed to participate in. And so, like you said, it makes the pool smaller. So it makes it less likely that those genetic freaks that would like excel at that thing,
Yeah,
at a level that no one else in their
they don't
field
even
really
pursue
would.
it.
Like they've never even tried. Like there's less of a chance that they will try it than their male counterpart.
yeah.
Again, that's all cultural. It doesn't really affect manhood per se, but like it's definitely something worth worth thinking about, worth talking about. Maybe not dive deep on this episode, but like it's I think it's worth talking about. I think it's a very interesting topic.
So I kind of think that with men in organized sports, it's a way for, and like I said, back to biology, I think it's a way for men to pit themselves against each other, but in a socially acceptable way, versus, of course, going through some old cavemen type tactics. But
Hmm.
it's a way of saying, "Hey, I'm better than you. I can prove it. Let's go to the court, or let's go to the rink, or let's go to whatever, and I'm gonna dominate you, and then I'm gonna go, back home to my kids, and everybody's fine."
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, let's pull the lens out, right? Let's take a farther back look and apply this same question. Why do you think men are drawn to watching sports versus participating in sports?
Yeah, that mean, also I think goes back to that carnal wanting to see. I don't know. So that then, ah,
What's to
I
me?
think
it's
that I think
hard-
that's a good part of it. Just think about watching football, right? Guy, you like watching football. It's interesting to watch, but if someone gets, fucking smashed on a play, people are freaking out about it. They love that.
Yeah, so
I
I,
don't.
I was trying to figure out a
we
way to
want
say
we
that.
want to see organized violence. That's what
Yeah,
it is.
do we crave the violence of it?
I don't.
Is the question.
Well, so that's the thing. You are more excited for an insane play than an insane tackle.
Yeah, I am. I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm
Well, I'm
not.
the same way. I think most people are that way.
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't.
that
For me, it's not a physical thing. I even when I'm watching UFC, most of the time when it's getting like super brutal, those aren't the exciting parts to me. I like when they're like up and they're punching, they're going for hits, and somebody's getting some good ones, and the other person's defending. Like I like that, but I don't just like the brutality. Like I'm not like, oh yeah, he's bleeding everywhere. Oh,
they're
he's
both
poking his
bleeding
eyes
profusely,
out.
hammer fisting each other's face. Like,
Yeah, like that's not it for me. I don't like seeing people hurt. I don't like any of that. So I don't think it's just a need to watch people have violence. I like the skill. Somebody who just like
Yeah.
jukes somebody out or pulls this crazy move or makes this miraculous catches where I'm like, holy cow. Not when somebody just like, I mean, yes, if somebody just knocks somebody in football before I realize if they're hurt or something, I'd be like, oh
was it when
God.
Clowney was at USC and he made that tackle and the dude's helmet ended up like halfway
Just
down the field?
exploded. God, that was the biggest hit I've ever seen.
Like I was in Carolina for that, and I didn't live that far from the stadium, and I swear to God, I heard that hit.
He was a monster. Too bad he didn't. He wasn't that great in the NFL.
Ah. So here's a question for you: do you think men watch or play sports more than women, and why? I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but
Yeah, I don't
I
know that we
would
can really.
I would
ahead.
imagine. Like I just
Yeah.
I don't know anymore. I think it's a lot more common, that women are playing sports, obviously, but
yeah,
just because it's not being televised or not as many people are watching it, I'm sure I don't know what the percentage is. I haven't looked any of this up, but I'm sure a
I just
lot of women are playing sports.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's not a lot, but I don't think it's on that level yet because I still don't think it's culturally pushed as hard.
Yeah.
Like I don't think people are like parents are always going like, "Come on, Kaylee, play soccer. Come on, play tennis." Whereas like every dude is basically like, "What sport are you going to play? What sport am I going to put my kid in?" That sort of
And
thing.
it's not even that. It's like, okay, which 3 sports are you gonna play?
yeah, it's
Yeah, well, yeah, when you're a kid, you got to find the one you're good at.
yeah.
yeah.
It's like you
I wasn't
talk to-
asked. It was kind of like, hey, you're playing something. Choose.
I mean,
You're
how
not
many athletes did you know in high school, like good athletes that played just one sport?
That was pretty
I said-
rare. Most of the time
yeah,
they did
like-
at least two.
Yeah.
Yeah, the majority of pro athletes lettered in multiple sports in high school.
Yeah, and
We
they
gotta
just
think,
picked one
like,
for
all
college.
of those things will add tools to your toolbox, skills,
Yeah.
and discipline and athleticism in different ways. So the guy, the kid that plays, he's a wide receiver in high school, but he also plays basketball, might, have a little bit of advantage going into college than the guy who didn't.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worthwhile. But yeah, I don't. It's one of those things where like boys have that opportunity. I don't know that, and they're almost complementary sports, right? Like not only do this, the skills are different, but they could kind of transfer, but they also play in different seasons. Like I don't know much about high school sports. I don't know that sports that girls participate in have that same kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like that kind of benefits the other sports they play. That kind of cohesiveness to it.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, it kind of goes back to the opportunities. The world is very slow with giving women the opportunities to do the same thing as men. And I think because men had that advantage so long of not letting women do things and men doing sports or doing these other things while forcing women to take subservient roles and, having the women's suffrage movement and getting them the opportunities to finally do what they want to do. They're just now kind of, well, not just now, but worldly speaking, they're finally getting to that chance to come up. And I think in the future, I think it'll grow more, and I think it'll be pretty exponential.
I'm wondering if you think like women will be fans of women's sports and men will be fans of men's sports. If you think there would be like cross, or if you think women and men will play together.
I think it's the popularity thing. So even right now, like with what I said earlier, with how I noticed that there's a lot more women who are like super into sports. They're into to men's sport. Like, unless I think with most of the women I know who play sports, unless they played that specific women's sport, whether it was like basketball, softball, soccer, played on a women's team, they typically, if they're into sports, they're following a men's sport.
Mm-hmm.
So I still think it's extremely niche. But it could, I definitely could see it growing. I mean, you see it more on TV, you see it more, culturally, just kind of out in the world. You hear more about it versus 10 years ago when there was, some women's sports. You think of how more often you hear about like the WNBA versus like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the downside to that is, or the real flip side is, I don't think you could ever say that you heard something positive about it. It's
Exactly.
always portrayed like, you're like, oh, you've heard more about the WNBA, but it's like always somebody joking on it. Always somebody
don't know.
bringing up how they want to be paid more because LeBron makes more than the entirety of the WNBA by himself. Like that sort
Well,
of
I mean,
thing.
I just, from my perspective, as someone who doesn't really talk sports a lot, I don't follow sports that heavily. I don't have cable at the house, but when I'm at work, I don't like watching news. So if I can change the TV, I'm just gonna put it on Sports Center, and I see a lot more about it and women's
Mhm.
sports in general on Sports Center and different programs like that.
Yeah, I'm sure
than
it's
I
getting
used to.
pushed. Yeah, I'm sure it's getting pushed by the media to some extent, because I mean, part of it is people saying, and rightfully so, you can't pay them the same because they don't bring in the same. It's a business. So maybe
Yeah.
one way to try to combat that is to make more fans. And so they're pushing to the media more in the hopes that people will become fans, start to tune in, and therefore do it. But you're also asking, and this isn't some made up thing. I mean, you're asking people to watch like a slower game, a less, the shots aren't coming from, the same distances. They aren't moving up and down the field or the court at
Possibly
the
less
same
physical.
speed, less physical. They're not, hitting each other as hard. They're not, all that sort of jazz. And that's hard for a lot of people to go from watching that to that, because this seems boring to them now, even though it's high skill, even though like most of these people would kick our butt at it.
Yeah, they would smash
You
any
know?
of us.
Yeah, this isn't a
But-
comment on their skill. It's
No, not
yeah.
at all. Not at all. For instance, like I played a lot of soccer with the women's soccer team at Radford, and they were good, like, district champs, stuff like that. But just based on my size and speed, I could probably hold my own. I was nowhere near as like technically skilled. They could do all sorts of moves and they knew exactly how to kick it to hit this, but I could compete based on my speed and size. I'd bump them a little bit. I give them a little shoulder check. You know what I'm saying? I could take the ball. But like, they're way more skilled than I am. But it's just that difference between like pure physicality and that, which, I mean, there are some behemoths out there, just some really built, just different people, but they're, few and far between when it comes to comparing the physicality of one to the other, which is where I still think there's that bit of separation.
So here's a little something that I found here. So I was looking up some research for this podcast, and I found this interesting tidbit. Women's professional soccer is taking off around the world, but it's men who make up most of that viewership, not women. And in Germany, the male share audience for women's soccer is actually greater for men, 64% to 58%, meaning that 64% of men are watching more women's soccer. They're watching more. So the share for watching men's soccer in Germany is about 58% men watching that sport. 64% of men are watching women's soccer.
Okay, so the ratio of men who watch women versus women who watch women
Yes,
is actually greater than the split between men and women for males.
Exactly.
So, and watching men, they watch 58%, and then the women watch the other 42.
Kind of like what we talked
Yeah.
about earlier, right? Like, yeah, there are more women into sports, but they're still more likely to watch the more
Men's
popular
sports.
sport, which is the men's sport.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the men are watching the women more than the women are watching the women.
I'm not gonna lie, I love watching the women's national team soccer. I always watch like the big matches, the World Cup and stuff for them, because
I mean, the women's USA team is on the
Yeah.
map, man.
yeah,
Everybody
they're
loves watching that
insane.
sport.
Yeah, they're insane. I wouldn't keep up with them, not even the slightest, bro. They're gonna be fast. They're probably stronger, bigger, like technically skilled. Like, I'd fetch their water.
Yeah, I bet you would.
Now,
how much of that do you think is like they're more interested in women in the women's team, or just the women's team actually wins?
I think men just want to watch sports, period.
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
and they're going to watch it all. And and I think there may be more casual women watchers. I don't want to throw that out there as a statistic. This is my guess, but I'm guessing that's why.
Hmm.
So
I'd
Now
also
that's
love to know where they get those, like that data from as well.
yeah, I know
We'll
this
look it
one.
up.
Yeah, this one was done from a survey that they did. Now
Okay.
this is also a 2014 survey, so we are now in 2022. I'm sure these numbers are a lot more skewed. They're probably closer now.
Hmm.
possibly,
Then,
yeah.
so do you think, speaking of women and men's sports, do you think they should ever combine or will ever combine these sports, or will it always be a separate league?
I think Steven got into that a bit, or at least the topics he hit on kind of sum that how I feel for it. I think just biologically there's going to be differences. I think that also the what we talked about earlier with the pool of people that participate in the sports, the likelihood that your best of the best will participate in the sport they are best suited for is, like we said, it's probably lower in women just because of the push for them to participate or the lack thereof. I think certain things that you could do that. I'm not a person who takes sports serious in any way. I think it's just a game and that it shouldn't have as big a cultural impact as it does. So like if they wanted to combine or they wanted to do these things, like it wouldn't bother me none. But I could definitely there's definitely I feel like a benefit to it being separate, and the only thing you fear to risk by mixing it is either you have like a set minimum, you have to have this many women, this many men, whatever, or you end up in a situation where it just becomes a men's league. So I don't know how it would work. I don't know what
Yeah,
sports it would work best with. I don't know enough about it.
I think if it was ever going to happen, it's nowhere near close to now. I mean, we're nowhere. I mean, you if you take the best men and the best women in all these sports and you put them in the fit, at least the physical ones, right? Ones that act like it, you just simply they're not comparable. Like you can't compare anybody to the LeBrons out. Like it's just the dude's massive, and so he's going to have that advantage in that game. And so I just think we're really far from that ability because, like Sean said, either you give a minimum or you say, oh, you can all play in this, but that's going to be like, they're never going to get picked. Nobody's ever going to be like, all right, I'm going to take you when there's LeBron right there. Like, it's just not going to happen. So
yeah.
I
The
think.
downside I see. Oh, go ahead.
I just don't think that it's going to happen based purely on those things.
Yeah, I think it
Y-
definitely depends on the sport that we're talking about, and then yeah, if women do get into some of these sports, versus having their own league, the only positive I can see is that it gives them more of a chance to shine on their own court than having to compete, and they're always overshadowed. Like, everybody can name Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, but the other guys, everybody's like, I don't know who else played for the Bulls back in the '90s. But you got those stars who are there, they're just going to overpower and outshadow everything else. But I do have this little tidbit that I also found. Um, so it says testosterone, like all hormones, has multiple effects throughout the body. While it's true that testosterone can, in very large doses, lead to increased muscle mass, the link between natural levels of testosterone and muscle mass is not consistent across populations. Furthermore, evidence unequivocally linked natural testosterone levels to improved athletic performance remains elusive. Estrogen, on the other hand, seems to play a critical role in the endurance performance, potentially due to its role in glucose metabolism. One research study found that endurance training men has significantly more estrogen receptors in their muscles than moderately active men.
Yeah, that's
So,
why stuff like that you get tested for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that the same article actually spoke to that, and it was saying that um, estrogen and or testosterone testing in a lot of sports for women who are at higher levels can be a negative thing for them because they do get kicked out of these things, or oh, you tested higher, you must be doping or doing something else, you're taking supplements or you're doing whatever to get to that level. But the other part of that was that estrogen gives them an endurance advantage. So in sports like running and things like that, like track and field or Olympics type things, women might have the upper hand if they were to combine men and women, at least for endurance.
Yeah, I would be curious, like, if you took marathon runners and you compared the speeds of men finishing it versus women finishing it. I wish we would have picked that information up before we came into the show with that, because I would wonder, because you could say, oh, they have that and it helps, but then if we looked at the numbers, something tells me that it would be like, a 4 minute mile pace versus a 5 minute mile, men versus women. I still think they would do it because I think
So
they could naturally run faster, even if for a less period of time.
the world
Yeah.
record for marathon times for men is 2 hours, 1 minute, 39 seconds. For women, it's 2 hours, 15 minutes, 25 seconds. Elite men average about 2:05. Elite women tend to score around 2:22.
Okay, so we're looking at like a 17-minute difference on average for that.
Yeah.
So it's clearly that you can probably train yourself to have that endurance level that you have enough for what you're doing. But the men, due to probably size, stride, like these are probably taller people. They got just whatever it is.
Yeah.
They probably still end up doing it faster because of the fact that they have at least the minimum threshold for endurance, and then the speed
And these
and
little
the power.
hormone differences, and then the differences between musculature and bone structure and all these things that come into play in lower tier fields, right? Like if you're not necessarily looking at the most elite of the elite, you're looking at maybe a couple tiers below that, and you're looking at male and female populations. It may be a lot closer, but the higher, the more elite you go, the more these kind of small percentage differences, the more they kind of make a huge difference. So
Mhm.
you look at like elite tennis, the like the average like serve for women's tennis is 80% of that, of the same level like elite male tennis player. That's 20%. That's a When you're talking about the best of the best in the world, that's huge.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so when you look at sports like this, say like if you were to do the NFL, right, and combine that, like you're going to have a severe issue. But if it was something that was like, I don't know, or let's use baseball. So you're talking like major leagues, you're going to see that disparity. That even if it was a 5% difference, it's going to make a huge difference on the field and over, the 100 whatever game season they play.
Yeah.
But if you're going down, you're going to, AAA, or I don't remember if it goes up or down, but whatever the lowest, A ball is, maybe that's not as big a difference. Say you look at college ball, or college sports and stuff like that, maybe the difference isn't there. But again, when you start, it's like we talked about earlier with these guys dominating in high school, dominating in college, then completely burning out and not making really a ripple in the water in the NFL, is because you're distilling everything down to the most elite of the elite, where like unless you are like the genetic freak of genetic freaks, you're not going to succeed. And so I think that co-ed at a lower level is more likely to succeed, and that's why like rec leagues have co-ed succeed so easily, so well,
Yeah, like a
because it's
kickball
just a more
team.
even, it's just a more even playing field. Like I know a lot of people that play co-ed volleyball, um for the department, but I also knew guys that played with them, um who were world-class volleyball players. So like it kind of, when you would say when those guys were playing, it was a totally different game. No
Yeah.
one could touch them. Not just the women, but the men as well. But like especially so. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
So the
when you start
question
to
is
introduce that,
it because of the pool of people? Do you
it's gonna
think
have an
now that
effect.
do you think that once more women start getting involved, like they say, the next cure could be out there, but we can't reach that kid who's in the hood to give him the opportunities
Yeah.
to make that science.
It's kind of like the people
So
who aren't participating in sports. Could they be the ones that
yeah,
do that? I think they could close the gap. I think in most sports, it wouldn't be enough. I think in most
You
Yeah.
gotta
sports, it wouldn't
think
be
about
enough.
it. Like, there's nothing that expressly states women can't play in any male professional sport.
I mean they had a women kicker on the NFL, or at least try to. I don't know whatever happened with that, but
Like, it was talked about. But yeah,
yeah,
there's nothing in like professional football, basketball, baseball, whatever that says a woman can't play on a man's team. It's just
No
it
one
just
has risen
doesn't
to the
work. Yeah.
occasion.
Okay. So do you think sports make men aggressive? That's the question.
I
I think
think
that,
sports is an outlet for
Yeah.
men to get their aggression out.
yeah,
And
I
that
don't
may
know that it
be,
makes them aggressive itself.
yeah, I think it may get the people may think that they may get the reputation of that because it is an outlet, like Chris said. And so when you see, say like you're someone kind of on the outside of sports, right? And you see like boxing, for instance. The only thing you see of boxing is two guys viciously punching each other in the face. And you're like, wow, what an aggressive sport. Like all these guys care about is violence. What they don't see is everyday training and dedication and everything they learned and doing this since they were a child, all these things that put into it, in all the skills, the discipline, all they see is the aggressiveness. It's going to develop a reputation for that. I think all sports, if you're looking at it in a certain way, can develop that reputation of like, oh, it makes boys aggressive, it makes them this way. When really it's part of competitiveness to be aggressive. So
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Plus, I
I
mean,
know.
once these guys are done beating the shit out of each other, there's probably a decent chance that at some point they went out and like got a beer or something. Yeah. They're not fighting because they hate each other. They're fighting because they love the sport. They love what they do.
Yeah,
and money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
and
too.
and
and
money.
money. Yeah.
We're not doing it for the love of the game anymore.
So I did read another article, and it said that commentators constantly use martial arts metaphors and language of war and weaponry when describing sports action. It says on average, nearly 5 times per hour, sports commentary announcers describe action in terms such as battle, kill, ammunition, weapons, professional sniper, taking aim, fighting, reloading, detonate, squeeze the trigger, exploded, attack mode, firing blanks, etc., etc., etc.
All right, the professional sniper one. I feel like that one was.
That was a reach there.
I
But
actually don't think I've ever heard anyone say someone's shooting
Well,
blanks.
That was when Tom Brady was on the field and he was throwing those bombs, and he was a professional sniper on the field, hitting Julian Edelman. That's right. But
Yeah. So before or after
Fine.
he deflated the
All
balls?
right.
Like was that who was
What was that
sniping
before, after Deflate Gate, before, or after Spygate?
listen, listen.
Which gate was it around? Just trying to locate it when he was doing that. So
Yeah. So what do you guys think about the terminology that's used, especially with like young impressionable people watching, young kids, young men? Do you think it gives them the illusion of aggressiveness?
I think it's just playing on the aggressiveness of it. I don't think it necessarily. I don't know. I don't know that it adds to it per se. I mean, the words aren't changing what's happening, but I guess the words can change how you view it, how you perceive it. So I guess it does kind of ramp up the physical or like the violent nature of it a little bit. I don't, depending on what it is, I don't know that it really, is a bad thing. If it's martial arts and they're using martial arts and weapons and metaphors, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the things that, like you said, like we're in America, we have a certain culture,
Yeah.
and I don't think that anything of those things are necessarily far outside of that culture enough to be, I would say, considered a violent influence
I
or something
think
like that.
so. Now I'm thinking about it, and I'm kind of taking also into competitive gaming and stuff as well. But we do tend to use things like destroyed them, slaughtered them, like those sorts of, and that does add like this different, deeper level of aggression, but also like disrespect to it in a way. It's
Yeah.
not just like they bettered them in this bout, right? Like
They performed in such a way that they defeated the other team.
yeah, it's like they got decimated, they were slaughtered, like they were torn to pieces, and it's like, well, maybe there is a little bit of some aggression, some anger in there.
The whole purpose of commentating is to be entertaining.
Yeah,
That's
dude,
it.
I know.
They're just adding entertaining to it or entertainment to it. And so why wouldn't you use some very over the top language?
Yeah, we're not arguing whether or not
Yeah.
why
No,
they're
I'm just saying
using
that's the
it.
purpose of it.
Yeah, so their purpose is to do something like that, but is there a consequence of it? And you folks who aren't watching are going to be so disappointed right now, but there's just this pretty dog right in front of Indy right now that you can't see. Luna just sitting right there in front of the camera. So if you haven't looked at the YouTube version, head on over there, take a look at that now of the podcast, because if you tune in at around, I can't timestamp this because there's going to be editing, but I'd say somewhere in the, yeah, you know what, never mind, just look at your own timestamp and then
Watch the whole thing. Look for the dog.
There we go. There's a hidden dog. And
it's a hidden dog in
Finding
there.
a hidden dog.
yeah, I think when it comes to the war references, and this was very interesting. It says these war references used most often in NBA games, which is not very contacty. It says they was used in NFL games 27 times, and it followed by NFL games 23 times, wrestling 15 times, and
I think
yeah,
it
it
makes
just goes
sense.
down
You
from
do a
there.
lot more shooting in basketball, right? So like from a sniper shooting blanks because he's bouncing off the backboard. Like it makes sense. There's more, you
I
know.
don't know,
But you-
man. If you
but I
if
think
you
it's
ever
interesting
listen
for-
to an NFL game, you know how many times you say blitz and shotgun?
That's true.
Brady
That's
in the
true.
shotgun. Brady
Yeah,
in
I
the
thought it was
shotgun.
interesting that with NFL being a more contact sport, that it would not be talked about as the most aggressive.
No.
At
Not
least
to
when
mention, there's a position called a gunner.
yeah.
I do think it's talked about most aggressively, just not commentated
Yeah.
as aggressively. Like you definitely talk about the hits and the, you know, brutality of football more than you do basketball. You know, you're not watching basketball like, oh wait, the way you just tackled him, you know. I guess you would talk about it because it's not supposed to happen, but yeah.
All right, so here's another question for you guys. Are you less of a man if you don't watch sports?
Nah.
No, I don't think so. I think at a point and in
No.
certain environments, people might consider it, but I think in general, no. Like if I don't watch, you know, a specific sport, because there's so many that, you know, somebody's like, oh, do you watch football? And you're like, nah, not really. Like they don't know if you watch hockey. They don't know if you watch something else. So they can't really judge you, you know, and I don't think it does at all. And even if it is, it's just like one person who just really overly values a sport that they support. So
I think that's probably something that comes up more like in the South, like Alabama.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you roll tide.
Tide.
If you don't love football down there, you better get out.
That's such a
Yeah, I
cultural
mean,
phenomenon too, because
yeah, it's
I don't
crazy.
follow football that heavy. I'm not, you know, Cowboys, whatever, but definitely not like college. And even I'm like, roll tide. You know what I'm saying? Like, go Cox.
Go Cox.
Yeah, it just they all have these little slogans and things, and I know them, and I don't watch college football at all.
I will tell you, as someone who lived in a college football town for a number of years, it is
Life.
Jesus first, college football second.
Yes.
Everything else comes after that.
Yep.
Yeah, my family is divided in Alabama with the two teams that they have. So
Is that
every
Alabama and Auburn?
yes.
Okay.
So we got War
Look at
Eagle and
me.
Roll Tide. Look at you, yeah. So we got
Yeah.
War Eagle and Roll Tide, and every family function that it's going on, and they're getting the kids involved. Hey, go tell your dad. Go tell your dad. War Eagle, and they like, don't get my son involved in this. And yeah, it gets crazy. But I do know, stereotypically speaking, at least in the past, I don't know if it's changed, that if you weren't into sports or didn't have any knowledge of sports, then you weren't looked at as manly as somebody else who did. So if you're like in a work environment and you got the one guy who knows all the stats, he knows all the team players, he knows everything that's happening. Yeah, Chris,
Chris is
If
the most
it-
manly guy here.
in my work environment, you would be considered the most manly man because he knows all of these things.
Yeah, I can't do any of it. But yeah.
Not anymore. Put me on a parking lot. See what happens.
He's
Boss
just
all
tall. He's just tall. Decent
And he ain't
hands.
even that tall.
Yeah, decent.
I know. I'm not even that tall. I'm
Yeah,
just
but
taller
that's,
than you.
yeah.
It's not hard to be taller than you.
Yeah, but you ain't as fast. Can't catch me. We're competing on the podcast.
You ever trying to catch a mouse, bro?
Yeah, I'll be a mouse. Y'all can't touch this, all right?
Oh man.
They used to change the whole play style in the parking lot when I came out there.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Okay.
To get a little deeper, do men use sports as a means of bonding versus just talking about real issues?
Nah.
I would say yes.
I think so. Yeah. How often are you just sitting around and the guy's like, "So, would you see the game the other night?"
Yeah,
So
but
I will say
I
that
don't, do they
yeah,
do it to avoid issues or do they just do it because
I
it's an
think
easy way to
so.
bond?
I would think yes.
I think it's two things that coincide, right? Like small talk is easy with sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we also as men avoid talking about issues.
Yes.
So in a scenario, say like you and your dad, there was something going on, and you're sitting there with your dad, and there's an issue that needs to be talked about, but instead of talking about it, you talk about football or something like that. Yeah, I can see specific scenarios that it comes down to, but like in general, like day to day life, I don't think anyone's going to talk about anything real anyway. So sports might just
Sports
be
is
as
just
real as it
one
gets.
thing on the list.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
things guys will talk about before they talk about their feelings.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess for me in particular, I tend to bring up things. I don't like sitting on stuff. So even when we get on calls, I just lay out like I don't like this and I'm upset about that. And that's just how I am. I'm never gonna be like, so let's let's talk about the Cowboys because I don't want to bring up this thing that's bothering me. Like, no, I'm gonna tell you. Then we can talk about the Cowboys, but like maybe I use the ease into it, but I guess again, just for me, my experiences, I bring stuff up clearly.
Well, I definitely think men use it as a form of bonding for sure. Because if you can, hey, do you watch the game or are you on this? You like the same team? We've got a connection, and that definitely is a thing for a lot of men. I think, like you said, it's the easy way for men to get into small talk because we're awkward about talking to other men, or for whatever reason why I don't understand. But I don't. The avoiding real issues is the part that I'm kind of conflicted on. But yeah, like you said, I
Yeah.
can see in certain scenarios where yeah, instead of saying, "Hey, this is what happened to me this past weekend. I'm upset by this thing that's going on. I would like to talk to somebody about it," but instead you're gonna. I don't think he cares about what's going on in my life, so I'll just talk to him about LeBron James, and I can talk to somebody, but without having to get my issues all out there.
I think it's actually at least again, at least for me, the only time that I will use stuff like that or bring sports, whatever it might be, is when I know the other person won't respond to if I want to talk about something real. It's not that I don't want to do it or I'm not willing. It's just that I know, like,
Yeah.
okay, if I bring this up, they're going to sit there awkwardly. They're not going to know what to say. They're not good at this. So you might as well just be like, yeah, man, did you see that game? Because you don't know what else to say because they're not going to respond.
Yeah, it's like talking to dad.
Yeah. Like, you can't bring that stuff up. He's just going to kind of like nod his head and be like, yeah.
So is that more
Mhm.
common with men then? And does that lead us to talking about sports more?
Yeah, I think so. If you go up to a woman, and you're like, "Hey, I'm going through this thing and happened to me." Most of the time, they're going to have something they're going to say, even if it's just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." If you walk up to a lot of dudes and say something, they're just be like, "Oh,"
That's crazy, man. Did you see
Damn.
LeBron James?
probably
Damn,
just
bro.
grunt, literally.
Yeah.
But,
Mm.
mm,
Mhm.
dang, and that's it. So yeah, that's a problem on its own. Men just don't talk. Like
Yeah, that definitely is an issue.
you bring up issues and like you be in a group, the other three people will just sit in silence until you say something else.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand the reference.
Oh man. And on that note, guys, we are going to call it a night. Thank you guys for joining us here on the Be Honest Man podcast. Check us out on all of our social media. You can check us out at BeHonestMan.com. We got links to all of our social media. And thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
As always, be honest.
Be
Go
honest,
Cowboys.
man. Whoa.